Simon Rosenberg, former Clinton campaign advisor and president and founder of the New Democrat Network, and Mark Thiessen, former Bush speechwriter and fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, join us now with a little more insight. Thank you both for joining us.
Sure. Thanks, Heather.
So more and more people are saying that this deal, this fiscal cliff deal, just isn't going to happen because the two sides are too far apart and there simply isn't enough time left. So, Mark, I'll begin with you. What happens if we go over the cliff? What will Americans experience?
Well, I think we are going to go over the cliff, and quite frankly, I think it's a good thing. I think the prospects of getting a deal after January 1 are significantly higher, and that's for three reasons. First, right now, President Obama has all the leverage. After January 1st, the leverage shifts to the GOP, because President Obama is perfectly willing to go over the fiscal cliff and try to blame Republicans, but he can't default on the debt. So he's going to have to compromise sometime between now and February. Second of all, the baseline gets reset if the tax cuts expire. So everybody's going to be proposing a tax cut in January, whereas right now we're fighting over whether we should increase taxes or not. So you could see the possibility of a deal that can be seen as a win-win for both sides. And third, because if Republicans don't come up with a deal that gives up a bad deal right now, they still have the $800 billion in revenue they put on the table from limiting deductions and loopholes that they can use to buy down rates. So I think the odds are after January 1, we will get a deal, and it'll be a much more favorable deal to the Republican Party because we'll have the leverage and President Obama won't.
Okay, so Simon, basically what Mark's laid out there would be more of a bungee jump over the cliff instead of a nosedive. So what do you think about that possibility? Good thing, bad?
Well, I think it's going to happen, whether it's good or bad. I think that, hopefully in the first week to 10 days of the new year with a new Congress and a fresh start, that the two parties will be able to come together and hash this thing out. And I think the Republicans have to be worried about the way the public has seen all this. I think they have an enormous incentive to deal right now because the poll numbers show that Obama's numbers are gaining, the Democratic numbers are gaining, they're up in the 50s, the Republicans are down in the 20s and 30s, and I think that the Republicans have lost the economic debate for now with the Democrats. And I think there's a lot of pressure on them to get this deal done soon, and then we will start all over again because there's going to be a presidential budget in February, and we're going to be back at the table, negotiating this with the Republicans right away. So it's just it should be seen as a little fiscal break, or a fiscal, or we'll have to come up with a better analogy, but it's a temporary stopgap measure to what will then be. We're going to be starting this debate all over again in February.
And Mark, in terms of, who the blame is placed upon in terms of the public, poll after poll does show that they will blame Republicans. Is that a matter of messaging from Republicans, and what can they do, if anything, to change that? What have they done wrong?
Number one, the Rasmussen poll today shows that 44% would blame the Republicans and 36% would blame Obama, so that's an 8-point gap. That's not so bad. But second of all, when Simon says that we've lost the fiscal debate, he's on air right now endorsing 98% of the Bush tax cuts and opposing returning to the Clinton rates, who the man he worked for. So I think it's very hard to say that we've lost the economic debate. We're just discussing how best to. I mean, the Democrats were the ones who said that the Bush tax cuts should be temporary in 2001. Now they're bemoaning the fact that we're going to go back to the which was supposed to be the booming 90s and the golden years of economic growth. So I think I think we've got a very good chance to get a much better deal because Republicans have the leverage going in after January 1st. But if we don't get a deal, look, I'm perfectly happy living under the Clinton tax rates, and I think for all Americans, not just for the rich, but for everybody, because the fact is federal spending is now at the highest rate as a percent of GDP since the 1940s, and nobody except smokers and people who go to tanning salons have paid any higher taxes. So we can't keep passing on the bills to our children and grandchildren. If we're not going to cut spending, and if we're not going to have pro-growth tax reform, then we all have to pay higher taxes. And so the GOP position should be, let's live under the Clinton rates until we can come up with pro-growth tax reform.
And Simon, just quickly, as a respond to the part there about spending cuts. And what spending cuts is the Obama administration talking about? Guaranteed spending cuts.
Well, they've already accepted $1 trillion in domestic spending cuts over 10 years. They've put on the table some additional cuts in Medicare and Social Security, not as much as the Republicans want, but clearly they've moved on that. And I also think there will be substantial defense cuts if we want to make a dent in the deficit. I mean, this is the choice that's going to be in front of us. I mean, we have to do four things if we want to reduce the deficit. We've got to get more revenue. We've got to cut domestic spending. We've got to trim and reform the health care programs, in particular of Medicare, Medicaid, and we've got to cut defense. If we do all four of those things, we can make significant down payment in getting the deficit under control. If we only do some of them, we're just not, the numbers aren't there enough to make as much progress as we want. And this is where I think Mark and I agree.
Yeah.
I think over the next 6 to 9 months, we could see substantial progress towards smart fiscal policy in this country if the two parties can come together.
We'll see what happens. Have to wrap you up there, though. Thank you both very much for joining us. Till Monday night. Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yes, you too.